Welcome, everybody, to the Aliens and Cowboys podcast. I'm your co-host, Garrett. With me tonight, Nate and Joe, as always.
Hey, everybody.
Jello.
Yeah, tonight here, we're going to discuss our 5 favorite movie villains, and we'll break those down for you guys. We each chose 5. Surprisingly, I believe we have 5 different ones each, which will be great. We'll break down why they're our favorites. We'll kind of get into some of the ups and downs that these characters have, and why essentially they are villains and they deserve respect there. Before we get into that, pop culture as always. Nate, I know you have some pop culture to talk about.
Yep, 2 items for me. I played for the first time last night Apex Legends.
Nice.
Which I really enjoyed. Free to play, new Battle Royale game. Just really fine tuning a lot of user-friendly things which are weird but just make the game so smooth and convenient. But I just had a blast for an hour that I played for it. So check it out if you haven't. It's free to play, like I said. It's not a pay-to-win situation. And then the other thing I saw, Netflix movie Velvet Buzzsaw. A little bit off-the-cuff Sundance movie starring Rene Russo and Jake Gyllenhaal. Really like the writing. Like I said, it's kind of a weird, oddball, art, horror type film. But if you're into watching something weird, check it out.
Very cool. I just had a couple really quickly to touch on, too. If any of you guys are Disney fans out there, Frozen 2, the trailer did drop for that. My daughter is going to freak out. She's going to want to see that for sure. So it looks really good, though. I was really caught off guard by the epic scope that this trailer has. There was no dialogue in the entire trailer, and it shows some really cool things. It looks like the tone might be a little bit darker than the first movie, but even I'm excited about it. Looks pretty cool.
I've never seen the first one, so that I might have to check out the trailer, but I won't have any reference point to go off of. I hear it's good.
Yeah, it's a fun movie.
I did see the Aladdin trailer, which I know got a lot of controversy over Will Smith as the genie and his portrayal, the way he looks.
Reviews there, I think.
I think that my criticism, and I might be the minority here, I thought that Jafar looked really young. And when I remember watching Aladdin, I thought Aladdin was kind of a younger person and Jafar was older. And I always pictured him as an older man because I think that's the depiction of him in the film. This depiction of him, he looked like they're the same age.
Yeah, he does. He looks very young in it. I agree with you. That kind of caught me off guard. I was kind of prepared for Will Smith as the genie because I heard about it before seeing the trailer. But yeah, the young Jafar kind of
I don't think anybody's talking about that. But I really liked... I'm going to go see that. I think it looks really neat, and I think it's going to be really cool. So that's pretty exciting.
Definitely. I just had one more to touch on here briefly. It ties into our last podcast where we talked about Lord of the Rings. So they're actually doing a biopic of sorts about Tolkien. And his early life, I think, is the primary focus of it. A lot of the clips that you see in the trailer do focus on him as a young man fighting in World War I, for example. It looks really cool for how they're maybe going to merge some fantasy themes with the realities and horrors of war. So they have what looks like some trench warfare, but then they pan to a scene of knights charging each other essentially on this battlefield of ash and fire. It looks really epic, and it's a cool way to probably deliver Tolkien's story. So I'm excited for it. I didn't even know it was set to be released. So
I didn't either. I haven't heard about it.
That caught me off guard too, but very exciting surprise when I saw that today.
Yeah, also previously harking back to another episode, Terminator announced the title of Terminator 6 is going to be called Dark Fate.
Nice.
And I just actually saw a small snippet where Cameron said that Schwarzenegger might turn evil again in this film. So it's kind of exciting, and I think that will be pretty nice. Hopefully this is a successful reboot. Anything else to add, gentlemen?
Nope, those were the main things I wanted to touch on at least.
Perfect.
Keep pop culture brief.
Before we get started, 2 things I want to touch here. One was listener feedback. Well, actually, they're both listener feedback. One was not really criticism of the length of our podcast. I know we do longer podcasts. We kind of just turn on the mic and start talking. And we sometimes go for an hour. Sometimes we go for 2 hours. For some people, the people who don't like long podcasts, tough. Sorry. We got important stuff to say.
I have 2 things to say on that note. One, I'm sure you can see the length of the podcast before you start it. So you know what you're getting into.
Yeah.
And 2, the technology these days, it actually saves your play so you can pick it up at another time.
Yeah, I listen to a lot of podcasts that are more than an hour long. I simply pause it, and I can come back to it, which is a really nice feature. Another listener kind of asked us our opinion on something, and so this is what I want to bring to you guys before we get into our villains discussion. He asked, what is our opinion on blockbuster movies today? He provided his opinion that he thinks that blockbuster movies today suck. And he thinks, do we agree with that? Or do we think that blockbuster movies today are successful or are considered to be good quality?
Did they give a particular reference as to blockbuster, like a time period?
Yes, he did. And I asked him that. And I asked him, what does he think that the last era of good blockbusters were? And I asked him what was the last good blockbuster he saw. The last good blockbuster he referenced was he really enjoyed John Wick 2, which I acknowledge wasn't that long ago. Okay? Predominantly, though, he picked the era right before kind of Spider-Man 2, Batman Begins, about 2004, 2005. He said was kind of the time where it seems to be that blockbuster movies now, kind of the start of the Marvel, right?
It really was,
superhero trope, that blockbusters have gone downhill. Comments, opinions, guys?
Something that comes to mind for me is like how Hollywood recycles the same material over and over and over again, and you just get the same rendition of the same stuff all the time. That's one probably criticism of seeing the same old with nothing new. And the other criticism is like CGI and how it takes a front seat as opposed to maybe the storyline and the drama and that sort of thing. And they rely so much on the CGI that it lacks so much to resonate with the viewer in respect to, pulling out the heartstrings or whatever as a drama or some other genre in that respect.
Yeah, okay. Fair enough. For me personally, I do like blockbusters. I'm not huge on art house style, interpretive movies, things of that nature. When I go see a movie, I want it to be kind of over the top. I want to be entertained. I do like strong stories, certainly, and I can absolutely recognize when some of these blockbusters are sidelining that for spectacle, and sometimes that really stands out. Some movies can pull this off better than others, of course.
Well, go ahead, Joe.
No, that's fine. I was just going to say, I do like a strong story, but I'm a huge fan of the MCU, especially a lot of the other blockbusters that are out there. I like the scope and the spectacle of it. So
yeah, and I think we actually touched on this in our previous episode, the idea that Hollywood, they don't want to just make one movie.
Right.
They want to make a trilogy. They want to make a universe. So they're looking for world-building stories, and that's kind of what they're pushing. They don't want just one Marvel film. They want them all. DC wants the DC universe. They want the Marvel universe. They're going to come out with a new Pirates of the Caribbean. Who's to say that they don't reboot it and all of a sudden, next thing you know, they expanded it into the next universe and here comes Jack Sparrow back, right? Amazon's going to have Lord of the Rings introduce another world building.
Exactly.
Game of Thrones is going to have potentially 5 prequel series. Like, they just want to build the world to build off previous stories, right?
I think that's an easy cop-out a lot of times, too, because you're portraying, different sideline stories. But a lot of times, so the reboot of The Mummy, for instance, they wanted to do a big monster franchise. It died, right?
Yep.
DC Universe, for the most part, all intents and purposes, nowhere near as successful as Marvel was. That died as well. But they keep producing kind of off-topic movies for it. I think it's really difficult to do. And they're all trying to follow the Marvel model.
Yeah.
And aren't quite as successful.
I agree. It's a tough thing to do. I think that they push that world building, like both of you were saying, ahead of anything else, and it clearly trips them up sometimes. Sometimes they pull it off. MCU, of course.
Yep.
Sometimes it stumbles a little bit before they actually can find their feet and run with it. So,
okay. Is it just the fact that most stories that we think about are already done? That most tropes are already going to be rehashed and revisited. Like, for instance, if you were to all of a sudden come up with a skyscraper movie like The Rock, I don't remember what the title of it was.
Oh, Skyscraper.
Where his is it Skyscraper? Where his family's taken hostage?
I never watched it.
Any skyscraper movie, to me, is going to come back to where there's a hostage situation. Die Hard. Right? And I think that it's not going to ever be as good as Die Hard. And I don't want them to remake Die Hard, but it's already hashed out, so they have to come up with new spins on it, new way to reboot it, and it's kind of like Fast and Furious. they just keep extending it, right? They're going to go to Fast and Furious 10, and I mean
to infinity and beyond. They're going to keep on trucking with that.
At what point do you jump the shark and it's a complete failure to ruin like the entire series and never do one ever again?
Well, and that's the thing too. As long as they keep making money, right, they're going to keep going. And so Pirates of the Caribbean, clearly the last couple weren't successful. There we go. We think they're done. They're not done. They're just going to reboot it a different way and try to make money off of it.
See, I wonder from the studio's standpoint, if they say, okay, we can invest way less now because we built this fan base. We don't have to put that much effort into this thing from a profit standpoint and say, okay, we spent $100 million on this movie this time. We're going to spend $80 million in the hopes that people see the name. Yeah. There's brand recognition. And then we're going to go see the movie, and it's going to be a turd.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was talking to Joe, I think it was maybe before our last episode on Tombstone, which if you haven't listened to it, or Lord of the Rings, go back and listen to it. One movie I watched that was on Netflix not too long ago was Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels.
Yeah, that's right.
And I can't imagine that would have a high budget because a lot of the actors probably weren't as well known at the time of this film. What a great story. And I know that a lot of people really like Snatch. I prefer Lock, Stock over Snatch. And I just think that it's just a great story of great characters that are coming together and kind of have a world built within the two movies that you can kind of bring characters in and out. Like Vinnie Jones' character comes in and out of those both films. It's kind of the same guy. I don't know. I think that's just kind of it makes me think about movies that have that ability, kind of like Kevin Smith movies.
Yeah,
right? Low budget. He builds this world in a way,
Absolutely.
But he just doesn't have to spend a lot of money. I wouldn't say he has great stories. Okay, just a lot of jokes. But I think that's pretty successful, and I think that there's a point to make that Hollywood could go back to something like that versus just continuing on with let's just have more explosions. The James Cameron Avatar 7, and just keep moving forward down that.
Yeah,
line.
that's true.
I read something recently too. There's a very interesting statistic about the amount of time that Tom Cruise runs in a movie, the more profitable that movie actually is.
Yes.
Like, what a weird statistic.
Oh, that's a great
I relate it to like the MLB when they say, all right, with left-handed pitchers pitch against the Nationals on Tuesdays, and they get this weird statistic that essentially mean nothing in the long run. But
well, they're entertaining to read about, though. Yeah, and I mean, I do think there's stories to be told. Just to kind of go from what you originally asked, there are certainly stories out there that need to be told. I think so many of us are so cynical at this point. A lot of us defer back to the fact that, this has been done a million times, and you kind of get into that mindset.
And to kind of close out this discussion, to move on to our topic, if you think about Fast and Furious 1 to Fast and Furious 8, it's a completely different story. You went from a street racing movie to stopping nuclear warheads from blowing up, right?
Yeah.
Kind of like Mission Impossible. You went from a espionage thriller to stopping nuclear bombs from going off. It's almost like it just keeps stacking on top of each other how much he has to go through or how much he has to run, right? And I will say the last Mission Impossible, went and saw it, really good. I really enjoyed that franchise. I really like Tom Cruise. So it's a really good movie. And it was, it's good action, and it's a good story.
Nice, yeah.
And based on good characters. Ethan Hunt's a solid character to have in a movie. But digressing, we'll get to the main topic here. We are discussing 5 favorite movie villains. Now, I will tell you my 5 favorite are specifically chosen based on villains I will root for over the hero. So these are not the 5 best villains all time. Okay, we are also predominantly sticking to movies. No TV show villains are showing up. Movies only. My particular 5 are my favorite that I root for over the villains, and I ranked them. Joe, your criteria?
Yes, so I also ranked mine. Mine's a little bit different. I don't necessarily root for them at all times. Mine's kind of grounded in the charisma of that character, and really, to put it bluntly, how cool they are in the movie.
Okay.
Mine has really no reason at all. They are obscure movie villains or forgotten fanatics and fans of these particular villains. Just
nice.
People that you like.
Yeah. We have, like I said, these different criteria of why we chose our 5. At the end, we'll kind of discuss maybe potential best villains. But again, I want to stress these are not the 5 best villains. We're not trying to say these are the 5 best villains. We will have our list, and we'll have a few honorable mentions at the end to kind of talk about people who could have made it, did not make it. So I will start at number 5. I chose Frank Lucas from American Gangster, played by Denzel Washington.
That's right.
The reason why I chose Frank Lucas, and I know there's a lot of people screaming at me right now, is of all the Denzel Washington movies to choose, why I did not choose Training Day. And I could just simply argue with Training Day, by the end of the movie, I'm no longer rooting for him. He turns into a complete, I'm just going to say jerk. He's extremely corruptible, which is fine. He's the villain of the movie. But you start off rooting for him because you kind of like that anti-hero. He just really, by the end of it, you're rooting for Ethan Hawke. So I chose Frank Lucas because this is their clear difference of villain versus good guy. In that movie, Russell Crowe is by far a good guy, right? He's a kind of a Boy Scout. He doesn't take money, doesn't take drugs when all of his other cops are corruptible. He's incorruptible. Denzel Washington, he is the prototype of like, say, The Godfather, right? He is that mafia figure that you're rooting for. Whereas in any other mafia movie, there's really not a villain or a good guy. They're just the anti-hero that you root for the entire time, like Pacino and Godfather. With Frank Lucas, I root for him. And the reason why I root for him, I think, is because of the existence of another character who's played by Josh Brolin, where he's such a corruptible cop, you just want him to get it, right? And you want Frank Lucas basically to end him. So ultimately, I think that having the mafia trope, having this character, he is doing things for his society, not just destroying New York City with the crack epidemic, right? But he's providing things to the poor. He's building uses his family ties to build his empire. I think he's ultimately a great stand-in for that mafia villain. And again, in that movie, I'm rooting for Denzel Washington, right? Not to necessarily kill Russell Crowe, but just not to get caught. So yeah, that's why I'm starting off number 5, Frank Lucas, American Gangster.
It's a good pick. I'm going to dive right into mine. My number 5 would be The Predator, specifically from the first movie with Schwarzenegger, just titled Predator, of course. Watching this when I was younger, The Predator really just kind of captivated my imagination. I love throughout the film, too, who can we get to stop Schwarzenegger, right? This hugely intimidating force, and then you see The Predator. And oh boy, you know it's going to get real after that for sure. I love all the weapons that he's got. The camouflage, the blades, the targeting cannon. There's just so many cool things that really kind of kick-started this franchise, but also, of course, would bring together franchises. Whether that is a good or bad thing is certainly up for debate. But I will say, as much as Aliens vs. Predator later on was kind of not the greatest movie overall, I really do like how you kind of get to root directly for the Predator in that movie when they team up, of course, to take down some of the xenomorphs. So overall, great sci-fi villain / hero at times.
Yeah, I would say the Predator is like symbolic of the perfect hunter. Yes. And I think that's a really formidable opponent. Really good choice.
I watched the recent Predator version on that on a plane to Mexico.
Oh, nice.
I did enjoy. I think it's a subject of kind of upscaling a movie that's already great and trying to overcome kind of the bar that's set from the original.
Nice.
It was kind of cool. They had some decent concepts in there that progressed the plot, but yeah, I still like the original much better.
Yeah, I think the only thing about where I would choose Predator on my list of people I root for is in the second one, because I'm just not a Danny Glover fan.
Oh,
and I'm okay. I don't want you taking out Arnold. You want to take out Danny Glover and Aliens and Cowboys Bill Paxton, right?
Oh, Bill,
favorite Bill Paxton.
Bill Paxton.
Feel free to take them out.
Poor
Just
Bill Paxton.
Leave Schwarzenegger alive.
Oh, I
right?
like Danny Glover. I like Predator 2 a lot. I thought that was a good movie.
I think he loses his I think being in the city versus the jungle just really loses something about this monster hunter.
Yeah, I mean, you got the spin where they're trying to make it the whole concrete jungle kind of vibe. I do agree. Something about the jungle itself pitted against nature as well as this monster that Schwarzenegger's trying to survive against. Yeah, I found that more compelling than being in the city. I agree with you there.
Yeah. Nate, number 5.
All right, so my number 5 is Dr. Octopus from the Tobey Maguire trilogy for Spider-Man.
Great choice.
Back then, the special effects I thought were pretty darn good, especially for his legs in that movie. He, in a sense, is very much an equal to Spider-Man at that point. You sense that he's very powerful. In respect to Spider-Man, who's established himself via the first film. And then I do like the dynamic between how he starts off as a friend of Peter Parker, science experiment gone wrong, and the chip on the back of his head kind of falters out, and he kind of fades into this villainy of trying to complete his work, and nothing will stop him in the process. So I kind of like that dichotomy between the two. But that's my number 5.
Very cool.
Yeah. And he's kind of a sympathetic villain. If I remember correctly, I think his wife dies, right? And so, he's a bad guy, but I don't know, he's kind of sympathetic. You're not totally against him. He's not the equivalent of, say, the Green Goblin, right? He's got something that's a kind of a redeeming factor about him. So, yeah, I think that's a good villain.
Yeah, definitely.
It's a good choice. My number 4 is Neil McCauley from Heat. He is played by Robert De Niro. And the reason why I chose him, too, is because this is a heist movie, which I really enjoy heist movies or bank robbery movies. It's an ensemble cast, which is really great. But the reason why I like De Niro is this is the first time that De Niro and Pacino appear on the same screen together. They were both in Godfather 2, but they were never on the same screen because they played the same character, or not the same character, but they played his dad different time periods so that they couldn't interact.
Right.
This is the first time De Niro and Pacino interact. And Pacino is trying to catch De Niro. And what I love about De Niro is he thinks everything through. He's very calculating. He's very loyal to his group of people to the point where the whole premise of the movie is, and his idea is, and we'll play a clip here in a little bit for you guys. He gives these speeches about you can't have anything in your life that you're not willing to walk away in 30 seconds or less if the heat's around the corner, right? It's probably one of the great quotes of his from the movie. And he gives that all up for the woman that he ends up liking. He does walk away from her, but he basically sticks around to track down a guy who basically betrayed his crew, right? And they basically start getting taken out by Pacino and the cops at the end of the bank robbery, which is just an awesome scene. Val Kilmer, another favorite, right? Yep. Tom Sizemore, really good. But essentially, heist movie, really enjoy him. He's just so calculated in that movie, and it's a great character.
There's a scene in that movie which I really love, and it is when Pacino and De Niro sit down, I think at a diner, and they just have a conversation between one another. And what they're willing to sacrifice in their personal lives to take down the other one. It's really amazing.
Yeah, and that's good. So we'll play that clip right now. So go ahead and listen to that clip of the conversation these two are having at the coffee shop. And from there, we'll see what, after that.
Guy told me one time, don't let yourself get attached to anything you are not willing to walk out on in 30 seconds flat if you feel the heat around the corner. Now, if you're on me and you gotta move when I move, how do you expect to keep a marriage?
Well, that's an interesting point. What are you, a monk?
I have a woman.
What do you tell her?
I tell her I'm a salesman.
So then if you spot me coming around that corner, you're just gonna walk out on this woman? Not say goodbye?
That's the discipline.
All right, so Nate, they're talking, they got done. Thoughts on that, on their interaction there?
I love it. I mean, they're both willing to sacrifice essentially everything. And you get a very good glimpse in the movie about just exactly what their personal lives involve and how many maybe divorces they've had or that sort of thing. And I said, no, I've got a job to do and I'm going to do it.
Yeah, and they're both
take
like,
it or leave it.
Yeah, he's like, I got a wife that doesn't like me, I got a kid, or an ex-wife that doesn't like me, I got a kid at home that doesn't like me. Basically, the only thing that matters to these guys is the job, right? Or I think it's De Niro is the juice, right? That's what matters, is that completing the job, taking down the cop, whatever it is, or taking down the criminal. That's all these guys live for. And it's just great because they're two such iconic characters and actors.
That too, yeah.
So, Joe?
Yeah.
Your number 4.
My number 4, we actually mentioned this franchise during the intro of this episode, but from Pirates of the Caribbean, Captain Barbosa. Specifically, the first one, The Curse of the Black Pearl. Everyone freaks out over Johnny Depp in this movie, of course, as Jack Sparrow. They thought he was the greatest thing ever. Me watching this movie, I thought Barbosa was one of the strongest performances and overall most believable characters from this. Obviously, he became so popular that they actually bring him back in later installments as a good guy, essentially, so you can root for him without even feeling bad about it. But focusing on that first movie specifically, of course, how he and the skeleton crew that he's got, special effects at the time, were absolutely outstanding. I think they hold up pretty well even to date also.
Yeah.
So it's certainly a fantastic scene the first time you actually see them in the moonlight and those skeleton faces, but very believable as a pirate captain. Once again, I mentioned part of the reason I chose my characters was the charisma that they have. You understand why these people are following Barbosa. You understand why they're trying to lift this curse and doing what he's setting out to do.
I think Jeffrey Rush's performance, that it's a testament to his performance that they are willing to bring him back and convert him to a good guy to bring him in for all the sequels.
Yes.
And fight alongside the crew and Captain Jack Sparrow.
Yeah, and he becomes, probably the second, I don't know, I think he's a more likable character than Orlando Bloom. I think he's more of a fan favorite than Orlando Bloom, especially by the end of that franchise, because they really kind of throw Orlando Bloom over the side of the ship.
That's true, yeah. And by the end of his arc, he has, I would argue, one of the best character arcs. Yeah. Even though, you can argue quality, of course, of the later movies that occurred in that franchise. But from a character perspective, the more you learn about him and his backstory, and eventually, spoiler alert, leading up to his death in the most recent movie, of course, I think it really completes his character arc in a fulfilling way. So it's really cool to see what they ended up doing with that character when he could have been, while still a great villain in the first movie, they could have left it at that if they wanted. But I thought it was really cool how they actually brought him back and continued the story.
Yeah. No, that's fine. And I think that's really good, too. Nate, moving on to your number 4.
Sorry, so my number 4, like I said before, I kind of chose my categories for obscure movie villains, so I'm going to jump all over the place. I had science fiction with the Marvel. I've got a couple of dramas. I've got a comedy, actually, coming up earlier, or a little bit later. And right now, I'd like to jump into a horror film, which I personally liked, which is Pinhead from the Hellraiser series. So, not immensely popular, but based on a short story by Clive Barker. Really interesting in the aspect of his theme of kind of relativity and the Cenobites, which he is considered a Cenobite, kind of the head or the priest of the Cenobites, which are kind of these, it's hard to describe, these kind of asexual demons that were kicked out of hell that get transported and trapped into this little puzzle box. And kind of their, like I said before, this theme of relativity where pain versus pleasure for them, it's all relative to what you think it is. So it's kind of like an evil genie in a sense that when you wish for something, they can always kind of turn it against you. So if you're living on an igloo and you want something warm, that's great, but you don't want it next to the sun, right? So so that's kind of this thing of like, what's pleasurable, right? Well, pleasurable might be just sitting in a chair versus standing all day, right? So they twist that, these demons twist it on you. And it's kind of an interesting concept about bringing out the evil in humanity themselves.
I can't really speak to that. I've never seen Hellraiser. I just know it's an iconic, he's got the iconic look, right? Of basically all like essentially like nails coming out of his head, right?
Right.
Yeah. I've never seen it. I can't really comment on it. I just know that he is, I know exactly who he is just based on his look. I think that's pretty iconic of a villain just on his look alone.
Yeah.
Other than that, I apologize, Nate. I've never seen it. So
like I said,
I have to check it out.
Obscure movie villains.
That's right.
All right. Number 3?
Yep, my number 3. One of my personal favorites here, Bane. Right?
Bane.
Yes. Not only have I dressed up as Bane for Halloween, we weren't to scale. But I really enjoyed this Batman villain. I think that he is the complete archetype of the Batman villain, right? He's a combination of Ra's al Ghul. He's got the mastermind of like a Riddler, or even as a Heath Ledger Joker. He's arguably incredibly intelligent. He's incredibly capable fighting. He's an equal to Batman, if not better. He's stronger, faster. Maybe it depends on the idea that Christian Bale's older by the time he gets to fight Bane, or Batman's older. Excuse me, but man, he not only does he almost kill Batman, and clearly could kill Batman,
right?
But he basically takes the entire city of Gotham and just cripples it. And I'm going to play this clip for you here in a second. He gives an amazing speech at Blackgate Prison, standing on the tank. So listen to the speech. We'll come right back.
Are corrupt. The rich. The oppressors of generations who have kept you down with myths of opportunity, and we give it back to you.
Gotham is yours. None shall interfere. Do as you please. But start by storming Blackgate and freeing the oppressed.
So on this speech, one of the things I love at the end, where he's basically before they liberate or as they're liberating the prison of all these prisoners coming out, basically saying, "This is yours. Take it." Take back.
He's empowering the people.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. He's giving to the people, right? He's taking away from the arguable elites of Gotham and giving it to the people, right? I think he's, like I said, I think he's just an incredible villain. Strong, fast, incredibly intelligent. And if it wasn't for a motorcycle tank, he wouldn't have died.
Yeah.
Right?
Darn you, Catwoman.
Yes. Yeah. Horrible character. Joe, number 3.
Yeah, number 3 for me would have to be the operative from Serenity. Not the recent Matthew McConaughey movie. Serenity, based on the series Firefly, which came out in early 2000s, did not have a very long run, which is immensely regrettable, but they actually were able to gather enough funds, essentially, and positive fan support to make a movie called Serenity. And it's absolutely fantastic. Keeping with our podcast theme of aliens and cowboys, this fits right into that. Starring Nathan Fillion, of course, as one of the most iconic sci-fi gunslingers, I would say, that's out there. But to focus back on the operative specifically, this is portrayed by Chiwetel Ejiofor, which, if you remember during my remakes that I was discussing, I want him in pretty much everything.
Yes.
The guy is an amazing actor, but I digress. The operative in this movie serves as a driving force to try and hunt down a member of the good guys' crew, essentially, is what he's trying to do. He believes completely in his cause. He thinks that what he is doing is the right thing and will stop at nothing to hunt this girl down. She has powers, of course. The government doesn't want this to get out, so he's trying to track her down, get rid of her before that secret essentially gets out there. So, amazing performance that Chiwetel Ejiofor delivers for this. It was the first movie I'd ever seen him in, personally, so he really stands out to this day. I do have to give a shout out to one of our coworkers, too, because I was trying to narrow this list down. It was kind of tough to do. And he brought up the operative. I'm like, oh, yeah, of course. Top 5 easy for me. Great villain that you...
He's a villain in Four Brothers, and he's not very good.
Yeah, fair enough. I actually have not seen Four Brothers, so I can't comment on that per se. But this was the first thing I had seen him acting in.
So I have a question for you, Joe.
Yeah.
If I have never seen Firefly, is this a good enough standalone movie that I can just jump in and watch it as a singular event?
Yeah, you should totally.
Okay.
So I'm the same way.
Totally
I've never
watch
seen
it.
Firefly either.
Obviously, if you've seen Firefly, there are things that will make much more sense. The characters and their backstories, of course, would make more sense. But I think it works very well still as a standalone sci-fi experience. And the performances across the board, I think, are very strong. And it's worth watching for that alone. Definitely.
All right, I'm going to interrupt you, Joe, and I'm going to jump to my number 3.
Yeah.
I'm going for kind of a drama here. And for anyone who remembers, Wall Street. Gordon Gekko. Mm-hmm. There was a recent interview that I was watching with Michael Douglas, and he was actually being interviewed for Ant-Man and the Wasp, and they asked him, he lives in New York City, they asked him, what do people yell at you through their window? And what they say is, greed is good. And if you ever get a chance, and hopefully we can get this clip in here, but listen to the speech about greed is good and about capitalism. It's a fantastic speech about why what you would consider maybe a one of the 7 deadly sins to be a good thing in U.S. society. And just kind of the way he uses individuals to attain power. But fantastic movie. Go check it out.
Yeah, and that's a good one, too. I'm trying to think of what the saying is, and I know that I'm going to get this wrong, and someone's going to probably yell at me. What is it? Blue horseshoe loves Anacott steel or something like that? And it's like the big buzzword for them to make these trades. Yeah, he's a really good villain. And obviously Wall Street, too, he kind of has a similar argument or speech about that greed is good. So we can play that. You want to play that clip here, too, so we can listen to that greed is good speech?
Yeah, sure.
I am not a destroyer of companies. I am a liberator of them. The point is, ladies and gentlemen, that greed, for lack of a better word, is good. Greed is right. Greed works. Greed greed clarifies, cuts through, and captures the essence of the evolutionary spirit. Greed in all of its forms. Greed for life, for money, for love, knowledge, has marked the upward surge of mankind, and greed, you mark my words, will not only save Teldar Paper, but that other malfunctioning corporation called the USA.
All right. Hopefully you got a chance to get a little bit of a taste for that movie, but highly enjoyed that movie. Oliver Stone, I think, was the director for that. There's also a sequel with Shia LaBeouf, which follows suit later on, but not to spoil anything. Watch the first one, then watch the second one.
Yeah, it's really good. That's a good choice. It's kind of like we should say a white-collar criminal, right? Yeah. My number 2, one of my personal faves, Hannibal Lecter. What can I say? This guy is the ultimate villain.
Yeah.
Not only does he eat people, he feeds people to other people, right?
So messed up.
He is the ultimate serial killer. He's an incredibly intelligent person. The clip we're going to play is him talking about trying to have be psychoanalyzed, right, by a therapist, which we'll get to in a second. And his response to it is just classic. But what's really great about him is he's so terrifying. Even though there's a glass between him and Clarice Starling at all times, you really believe he's still a threat, right? He's a threat just by talking to people. Obviously, Miggs kills himself when he's the guy that throws the bodily fluids at her as she walks by.
Oh, yeah.
But he's just the way that they have to basically wrap him up, cover his face. He'll bite people. He'll just do whatever he can.
Well, I think that's all physical stuff, right? But
right.
he straight out convinces his cellmate or his next door neighbor's cellmate to kill himself.
Yes.
Psychologically.
Yes.
That's nuts.
Yeah, not only that, but his performance, just the performance by Anthony Hopkins is great, to the point where I think even Jodie Foster had mental issues after the movie, and that's why she didn't sign on. Yeah, she didn't sign on for Hannibal because of that. But I think that, again, even though he kind of takes a liking to her and they have that relationship, and so you kind of think that she's safe, when he gets free, that's just terrifying, because you know what type of a killer he is. He kills quickly. As the way he stabs people, he knows the anatomy of people, right, being a doctor. And I just think that the fact that they come to him to psychoanalyze other serial killers, really impressive. Listen to this clip. This is between him and Clarice, where they're talking about being psychoanalyzed by a therapist earlier. So it's just classic Hannibal Lecter.
A census taker once tried to test me. I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti.
Obviously, Chianti, right? Fava beans, right? Eating livers. I think that's just everything that represents Hannibal Lecter. One thing that's interesting, I think in the book by Richard Harris, I think that Hannibal and Clarice actually get together and get married. It's kind of like a...
What?
I swear to God, I
never did that in the movie.
Right,
Yeah,
it's almost like a Stockholm syndrome, right? That she's always technically safe because of him, but that threat is so there and he's so menacing. Really great villain. So, probably one of the best serial killer villains. Joe, number 2 for you?
Number 2 also doesn't need any introduction. Probably very popular on just about anybody's list. Darth Vader, an obvious choice, but I can't think of anyone more iconic than Darth Vader, be it in pop culture or anywhere. I don't even really need to justify this too much, I don't think. A lot of you have probably seen the movies, of course. I will say everything I loved about Darth Vader really culminated in that scene in Rogue One. At the very end, when he ignites his lightsaber in the dark tunnel and just starts mowing down the rebel troops in that hallway. It's got a bit of a horror vibe, too, from how they actually filmed that scene.
I just don't feel like you ever really understand the power of Darth Vader in the original trilogy until you see the scene in Rogue One where he truly comes on the ship there.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
And just the power he's got where he's lifting people into the ceiling with one hand using the Force, blocking blasters with the other. He's just... It shows off his power, his strength, everything that makes him the iconic villain I think that he is.
Yeah, I thought the thing that was always really menacing about him, if you were to talk about him as a character, is the Force choke.
Yes.
The idea that he just he'll turn his back to you at the same time you think you're safe, and he just chokes you, right? And the fact that people just are simply dying while he's just standing there. And I think it's the scene where he's talking about the incredible power of the Death Star, but it's nothing compared to the power of the Force.
Yes.
And he starts choking that guy. That's such a great scene. That's obviously in A New Hope, but really menacing character.
Oh, very much so.
But what also makes that character, the look
Yep.
and the music. His music is iconic, right? The only other thing that would probably be more iconic is Jaws, right? To signify that he's the villain coming through.
Yep.
Darth Vader probably's got the second most iconic sound that goes to him.
Oh, definitely. My daughter can even hum that. Like, she knows the tune. She's like, oh, this is Darth Vader's song. It's just, everything about it is so iconic. Just as you mentioned, Garrett, his presence. What about his one-liners? The dude has a couple good ones that he throws out there throughout the film. So just everything about the character. I do like the parallels, too, from the first time you meet him in A New Hope, where it's virtually silent. It's his presence that really speaks to how powerful he is. And then once he starts speaking and Force chokes the guy up against the wall and everything, too, you know he's not a guy to be messed with. And I like how they parallel that silent power in Rogue One, which, of course, while they were filmed many years apart, they join perfectly together for the story that they're telling.
Well, I think what's kind of interesting in him as the villain is he's never the main guy in charge.
He's not.
But you always think, like, he could easily be the main guy in charge, right? He's not the main villain. He's always the sidekick villain. But he could... Because, I mean, that's just his choice to let, like, was it... I'm trying to think... Tarkin.
Yes.
To let Tarkin lead, to let Palpatine lead. And I know Palpatine's a Force adept and, is clearly a Sith. But the idea that at any point Vader could strike any of these people down and become the ruler of the galaxy, basically.
Yeah.
And chooses kind of not to.
Exactly. And Nate, I'll let you get on to your next choice here in just a second, but I'll throw out as well, if you guys haven't checked out the new comics for Darth Vader, please do. They're fantastic.
Take place, right, in a setting between Revenge of the Sith, Episode 3, right? And then they kind of fill the gap between Episode 4, is that correct?
Yeah, a lot of them do. That's correct. They focus on that time frame. There are still some comics that are set during the events of Episodes 4, 5, and 6. So they kind of run concurrently with that. But yeah, a lot of the more recent comics that you probably are hearing a lot of about, they're set between 3 and 4 in terms of Episodes 3 and 4. That's right. Fills in some of his backstory during that time.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm going to jump in on a much, much lighter note. So this is my comedic villain, Dr. Evil from the Austin Powers series. Mike Myers in that role is unbelievable, and hopefully we'll play some clips here in a second about how many one-liners he has. I remember in high school going to these movies and being so excited to listen to all this stuff.
Yeah, you can't even pick out what his best scene is.
I know, it's almost impossible.
He's
so
got
many good ones.
Yeah, he's got a lot of really good interactions, and I don't even know if it's better interactions with like Mini-Me or interactions with Seth Green, right, as his son.
Yes.
He is great, and he always has like these master plans that are clearly like 30 years too late or too early.
I mean, trying to collect billions when you could collect trillions.
Or sharks with freaking laser beams on their head. Yeah, that's a good one.
But it's such a good just spoof of gold 007 movies.
Yeah,
it is so good.
Yeah, and he's got that, whether it's the finger to the lips, right, upside down, and the way he's just kind of balancing as he's like talking, where he's like, he just seems like he's constantly moving. Or I think what probably the best thing that I remember him for is that shh sound that he makes when he's talking to Scott, and shh, I got a bag of shh with your name on it. That interaction, and we can play that clip. That I think is the best thing that he does.
Oh man, he's just such a fantastic villain. So many one-liners. So again, here's the clip of a few of his one-liners. Definitely go back if you haven't seen it. Go rewatch it again. You'll have a great time. I guarantee it.
Now, Mr. Evil. Dr. Evil. I didn't spend 6 years in evil medical school to be called Mr. Thank you very much.
Don't mess with me. I'm one crazy mofo. I had to pop a cop because he wasn't giving me my props in Oaktown. No? I heard that somewhere.
Very well. Where do I begin? My father was a relentlessly self-improving boulangerie owner from Belgium with low-grade narcolepsy and a penchant for buggery. My mother was a 15-year-old French prostitute named Chloe with webbed feet. Austin Powers,
He's the snake to my mongoose. Or the mongoose to my snake. Either way, it's bad. I do new animals.
All right, so Nate, Dr. Evil's one-liners, they're good. I'll move on. This one is one of my personal favorites. I really like this villain a lot. I think he's got a lot of great speeches. He's very menacing, and it's an amazing performance. It's overlooked. This is Bill the Butcher by Daniel Day-Lewis in Gangs of New York.
That's right.
This is, I think, probably one of the more underappreciated Martin Scorsese films. Stars Leo, or as Dr. Evil would say, Leo, right? I think that Bill the Butcher is so symbolic of this nativist, basically this idea of nativism that this movie is portraying against essentially the Irish, right? And I'm going to play this clip where he's going back and forth with Liam Neeson at the beginning of the movie before the two gangs have this clearly extremely bloody fight, right? He has a lot of one-liners too.
He does.
And he's such a character actor that you can just imagine Daniel Day-Lewis playing this character. And again, the reason why I chose
would not want to meet him at the lunch table where there were utensils involved.
Yeah.
Like Bill the Butcher.
Yeah, I mean, he's, like I said, I root for him because I know that Leo's the main character in that film, but you can't not like this character. And I know that he's a horrible person, right? But I don't know. It's just he's so captivating and he's so violent. But there was a scene I know where he's got a glass eye, right? And he takes the knife and he just taps that glass eye to tell you. That was ad-libbed. Like, Daniel Day-Lewis chose to do that, which is so iconic
cool.
of who his character is. And the only other thing I can think about with him is when he's talking to Brendan Gleeson on the barbershop, and he goes there to kill him, basically, because his guy lost the election, right? And Brendan Gleeson's like, I'm not going to, go to fisticuffs with you. Come up here and we'll talk it out with men. And he turns his back to him and immediately gets a knife in the back from Bill the Butcher. And he walks up, takes his club, notches it, like Brendan Gleeson always did, and said, this one's you, and just crushes his skull with it. I mean, it's just great. He's such a menacing character. Listen to this clip. This is him and Liam Neeson going back and forth about their two gangs. Just tells you everything you need to know about this character.
On my challenge, by the ancient laws of combat, we are met at this chosen ground to settle for good and all. Who holds sway over the 5 points? Us natives, born rightwise to this fine land, or the foreign hordes defiling it?
The ancient laws of combat, I accept the challenge of the so-called natives. You plague our people at every turn. But from this day out, you shall plague us no more. For let it be known that the hand that tries to strike us from this land shall be swiftly cut down.
Then may the Christian Lord guide my hand against your Roman popery.
Prepare to receive the true Lord.
Perfect. Joe, like I said, awesome character, Bill the Butcher. Let's go to your number one.
Sounds good. My number one, was tough to narrow this down, but my pick's for Prince Nuada from Hellboy 2. I was pretty much rooting for him throughout a lot of this movie. Like, obviously, I want the good guys to win. This character is portrayed by Luke Goss, who's hardly been in anything since. This is probably his most notable role. But Prince Nuada, essentially, he believes that humanity had their chance at ruling the world and has failed abysmally while doing so, and that they've essentially destroyed the earth. And his goal is to make his people rise up again to take over Earth and be the rightful rulers. He's also been essentially, his race, the elves, have been suppressed. They've been forced underground, quite literally. And he also doesn't agree with this. He believes that they shouldn't have to hide and essentially relinquish any kind of control over the surface world. So he needs to lead his army back, take over. Obviously, the Golden Army, which is the subtitle for the movie, that's his way of doing so, of building this kind of automaton army to lead against the forces of the world.
I really loved Hellboy 2. Every time I see it flipping through the channels, so if you're as old as I am, you remember flipping through the channels, and you catch a movie that you like, I stick there every time because of that character. I really like the difference between Hellboy's bull in the china shop type mentality versus Nuada's just graceful, agile way of fighting. It's really cool to see those two interact.
Yeah,
Definitely is.
And there's kind of an honor to Nuada.
There is, yeah.
Which we can get to in a second. I didn't know who Luke Goss was, so I just quickly Googled him. He's also the villain in Blade 2.
Oh, you're blowing my mind right now, isn't it?
Yeah.
Really?
He's the villain in Blade 2 that kills the other vampires, right? But anyways, back to Nuada. He gives some pretty good speeches in this film.
He does. He has a couple really good ones.
Let's play this one speech for these guys so they can understand this is kind of the honor of him and what he's representing.
Yes.
And why he has this like goal in mind to basically kill everything.
Exactly.
So listen to this clip.
The humans have forgotten the gods, destroyed the earth, and for what? Parking lots, shopping malls. Greed has burned a hole in their heart that will never be filled. They will never have enough. Look at this place. Where is the honor in it? Father, you were once a proud warrior. When did you become their pet? I have returned from exile to wage war and reclaim our land, our birthright. And for that, I will call upon the help of all of my people, and they will answer. The good, the bad, and the worst.
You've talked about previously, you think that they could do a rehash of this where they were to come back and bring him in on the good side?
I would have loved to see that happen. It's, of course, never going to happen, but you're right. During that remake episode, I had also brought up the fact that this is a comic book movie. If they'd really wanted to, they could have found a way to bring him back. He pretty much gets disintegrated at the end of this movie. I don't care. They could have found a way to bring him back. So they've clearly decided to go a different direction. But that's how much I was rooting for this guy, at least in regard to how charismatic a performance it was. And I would have loved to see him team up with Hellboy, not fight against him, in some capacity, which sadly we'll never get. So we'll leave that up to the fan fiction out there.
Fair enough. Nate, finish us out. Number 1.
All right, in my obscure movie villains, I'm jumping to something serious here. John Doe. Have you ever heard of him?
Yes.
Yes, if you have seen Seven. That is the name of the villain listed in the credits for Kevin Spacey, who portrays John Doe, who's psychotic, by all rights, who thinks he's doing the right thing by God, by putting the fear of God in other people for committing the 7 deadly sins. And one of the scariest things is he lives in complete anonymity through virtually the entire movie. And when you do find out who he is, or his character appears in the movie, he's completely calm. He's completely collect. And you realize that he's been planning this for years. And the atrocious things that he's done, he's lived with just completely calmly.
If I remember correctly, he turns himself in. Right, I don't remember if they. I know that they almost catch him at one point where they go to his apartment or a apartment. I guess I don't remember if they know who he is at the end, but he just shows up and he's covered in blood.
So they chase him down, right? Brad Pitt chases him down, which is a funny story about how he injured his hand during one of these chases, and they did not put that scene in the movie, I found out. But he ends up with a cast through the remainder of that movie to kind of fill it in. Anyway, I got a little sidetracked there. He puts a gun to Brad Pitt's face, but he never gets a good look at the culprit who's holding him at gunpoint. Then he runs off. He kind of gets delirious, runs off, and then he openly enters the police headquarters and gives himself up.
And he's covered in blood, which we don't know why he's covered in blood yet, which leads to one of the best endings in film of what's in the box, right? Where he clearly takes...
What's in the box?
Yeah.
What's in the box?
We don't even need to play the clip for you. That was Nate, and that's better.
Yeah. If you need a stand-in, Brad Pitt, just call me.
Yeah. Looks and everything. Spoiler alert, Gwyneth Paltrow, who plays Brad Pitt's wife, heads in the box. And basically the beauty of what John Doe's doing, or really shouldn't say the beauty, the psychoticness is, he's the last deadly sin, right? He played this game to get Brad Pitt to basically execute him, to ruin who he is, and to complete the 7 deadly sins, also taking out Kevin Spacey.
Kevin Spacey is envy. because he envies Brad Pitt
Yep.
and his wife's life, which Brad Pitt doesn't maybe recognize throughout the movie, or you're not led to believe that he appreciates what he really has. And Brad Pitt, I think he's the final seventh deadly sin.
He is.
Deadly sin, where he becomes vengeance, just like John Doe tells him to become.
Yes, listen to this clip of Kevin Spacey telling Brad Pitt to become vengeance. It's kind of creepy.
You tell me. That's not true. That's not true.
Become vengeance, David.
Ah, she's all right. You tell me.
Become wrath.
Tell me she's all right! She murdered a suspect, David. No! Just threw it all away, you know. No!
She begged for her life, Detective.
Shut up!
She begged for her life.
Shut up.
And for the life of the baby inside of her.
Yeah, so he shoots him, right? And he becomes the seventh deadly sin, completing this arc, this story, this game, essentially, that John Doe was playing. Really one of probably the better serial killer movies that's out there. Question for you guys. Hannibal Lecter or John Doe?
I don't know. I would say that John Doe had an end game. Where I don't know where Hannibal Lecter has a little bit more like, I want to survive and I'm more interested in human interaction and the psychology there and where we're going. But I don't know. It's a toss-up for me.
It's a toss-up?
Yeah,
Okay.
fair enough. In terms of, I guess, how iconic it was, which I know maybe you're looking at this more objectively, but I would say probably Hannibal.
Yeah.
For that, I mean, they're both awful.
The only thing John Doe
people,
has
of course.
for them is that there's finality
Yeah.
to the system. Or
Correct.
what he's trying to do.
Yeah, he kind of closes.
That's the only advantage I
closes
think
up
John
what
Doe
he's-
brings
Yeah,
to the
no,
table.
that's a good argument.
Now, we obviously have this list of these villains. We have a few villains for each of us who didn't make the cut. So we want to name a couple honorable mentions for each of us. I'm sure some listeners will probably yell at us for these. So I'll just quickly run through. I've got 3 of them. Tom Cruise, who plays Vincent in Collateral. Great villain. I think it's one of the first times Tom Cruise plays a bad guy. Awesome. Very good story. I rooted for him. He's kind of a great opposite to Jamie Foxx, who kind of gets a lot of critical acclaim in that film. Another Michael Mann film, too, directed Heat. Cyrus the Virus from Con Air, played by John Malkovich.
I had a guy at work recently complaining about when you shoot propane tanks, they don't actually blow up.
Well, he didn't put him in a junkyard, a plane junkyard with John Malkovich controlling it. Awesome villain. Gives some great speeches, right? Very charismatic in that film. Really cool. And my final one, Nate, to go along, is Kevin Spacey as well. He was originally going to be on my list as Kaiser Soze from Usual Suspects. I disqualified him because ultimately, since you don't find out that he's the villain till the end, you don't really I'm not rooting for him, and because you don't know he's the villain till the end, he didn't make my list. If we knew from the get-go he's the villain, he would make it. If I had a list of greatest movie endings, this would be on there.
Nice.
So,
yeah.
Joe, how about yours?
Yeah, I've got 3 honorable mentions here too. First one is from James Bond Casino Royale, Le Chiffre, played by Mads Mikkelsen.
Yep.
Mikkelsen, yeah, played by Mads Mikkelsen. I just absolutely love that performance. I think he does a great job at conveying kind of almost a subtle menace, because he's not so over the top. So many James Bond villains are these major plots to destroy the world with these kind of crazy means, whereas Le Chiffre, it's much more subtle, and because of that, I think more insidious in a way too. And of course, they still have a great Bond trope of something being kind of slightly off about the villain, where it cries blood, or it doesn't really cry blood, but blood leaks from his eye on occasion. So yeah,
that's a good one too, and I think that's one of the better Bond villains actually.
Oh, yeah,
That's maybe my favorite Bond movie.
Yeah,
I think it's probably mine as well. Actually,
same here. I'm all for Daniel Craig.
Yeah, me too. I think Daniel Craig's awesome. Yeah, Casino Royale is phenomenal. The other one I picked from Lord of the Rings, Gollum. Yeah, Gollum. I think it's interesting the trajectory his character arc takes as well. So being this creature that Frodo starts to pity, and he kind of teams up with them for a while. They need Gollum in order to reach their destination, and then obviously things don't pan out so well at the very end in regard to that. But it almost leads up to the fact that, is Gollum going to be redeemed? You know, you have this moment where you start to question, hey, maybe he actually will turn around. He'll start to see the good in himself again. those hopes kind of get dashed, and he obviously ends up trying to stop Frodo from destroying the ring at the end. But
Okay.
Great motion capture performance, too. Really revolutionary in terms of Andy Serkis and all the mocap he did for that, too.
Yep.
And lastly, I won't really dive into much detail at all, because I'm sure many of you know from Die Hard, Hans Gruber.
Yes.
Such a good villain.
Yes.
Speaking about the charisma as part of the factor for why I chose some of my characters, he was very difficult to remove from the top 5. Such a good performance and such a great villain.
Alan Rickman just plays a good villain in a lot of movies.
So good, yeah. Oh, man.
Yeah. Nate?
Okay, I've got a guilty pleasure here. The One. So if you haven't heard of it, the action movie with Jet Li, where he plays both the hero and the villain against himself. I really like that movie. And again, like I said, it's a guilty pleasure, so feel free to roast me.
That's a good one.
So another honorable mention, the Rocky series. Yep. Ivan Drago.
Oh, yes. That's a great pick, too.
Could you find him? Yeah. Cold War type, Russian versus America. Just fantastic movie.
If he dies, he dies. Yes.
Yeah. And lastly on my honorable mention list is Biff Tannen from Back to the Future series, right?
Oh, yeah.
You do not find a time slot where that guy is not an a-hole.
Yes.
Whether he's old, young, middle-aged, he is not a nice person.
Yeah, he's grumpy.
Yeah,
those are good.
Sure.
One thing I think we should do is, I know that our lists are obviously predominantly, or really all male, except for the Predator. I think that we should point out there are a lot of really good female villains, and I was kind of looking up some of these. Regina George is a great one from Mean Girls. She's a classic.
Oh, yeah, classic for sure.
Kill Bill has a lot of really good ones, right? Oren Rishiri, Elle Driver, Gogo Yubari, I think is her name. Really some good villains there. Kathy Bates, she's always played a good villain in whatever she's in. Bellatrix Lestrange from Harry Potter series.
Yes, that's a great pick too.
Yeah, those are some good ones. I don't root for any of them, so I couldn't put them on my list, but I do think we need to shout out there's some great, female villains without going back to you could do Maleficent, you could do Wicked Witch of the East.
Oh,
I mean, there's a lot of really good female villains out there. So not to forget them. Last, before we go, I want to ask, if we did do a Mount Rushmore of best movie villains, so the four best movie villains of all time, does anybody's get one off their list?
Yeah. Yes. Vader.
So Vader, I agree. I think Hannibal Lecter makes it.
Also agree.
I don't think anyone on my list makes it.
Okay.
I can't imagine having a guy like John Doe, who I rated as my number one, is just a plain Jane white Caucasian dude with a plain face, ends up on the Mount Rushmore of evil.
So let's say we agree. Hannibal Lecter, everybody agree?
Agree.
Right?
Yep.
Darth Vader, agree?
Agreed.
Who would be the next two spots?
Oh, it's such a great question.
Would Hans Gruber make it?
I was thinking Hans Gruber might.
I think so
Gruber
too.
might make it
He's
on
a stand-in for a lot of that type of villain of, basically this heist movies, like hostage movies, ultimate villain with this an ensemble of like a group of terrorists, like a group of a leader of a group of bad guys. He's a great villain in that sense.
Definitely.
How about fourth one? Final all-time villain.
All-time villains. Well, you know what a lot of people would probably choose for this? It's probably the Joker. Now, we can argue which. I won't even get into that. I knew you were going to vote.
Go back and listen to Jack Nicholson and make the great case for Jack Nicholson.
But I think a representation of the Joker might be a good fit. There have been a lot of interpretations of him in both film, which I know is what we're trying to stick to for movies, but even outside of that.
There's something that resonates with audiences that he gets brought back all the time. You know what I mean?
Okay. Yeah, okay. Would you put the Joker on in place of, say, an Alien, a Predator, Jaws, Freddy, Jason?
Some good villains there as well. What about Voldemort?
Yeah, I agree. I just really like Ralph Fiennes. He's a good portrayal. Or you could do Snape, right?
Yeah.
He's a great villain. I think, I don't know. I mean, I think the Joker as a character is good. That is a good one to put in there. Magneto? No, just kidding. You can't put Magneto in there. Not as an all-time great villain.
Because he does things for his own reasons, and they just don't align a lot of times.
Yeah.
For the
Yeah, that's true. Agent Smith?
No.
I don't mean not as
Nope.
iconic as some others that are out
All right,
there.
we'll do this. The Aliens and Cowboys podcast will officially set our Mount Rushmore villains as Darth Vader, Hans Gruber, Hannibal Lecter, and the Joker. If you guys have problems with that, you can add us at Alien and Cowboy on Twitter. Email us at aliensandcowboys@gmail.com. Go out, give us a rating, 5 stars, subscribe. We'd love to hear feedback. We want to be able to hear what you guys think we did right, what we did wrong. Content-wise, I don't want to hear about why you thought the podcast was too long.
Give us your Mount Rushmore.
Yeah, give us.
let
us know whose list we're gonna. We put up a fan page on Facebook, which we're gonna be pushing out there very soon. We're gonna put a poll up. We're gonna ask you whose list was better. We want to know who we forgot. Who do you think should be on the Mount Rushmore of villains? And who do you disagree with? Is there anybody on our list for the reasons why we chose our? Is there a better obscure villain than what Nate brought? Is there a better villain that you root for than what I chose? Is there a more charismatic villain that we're forgetting for Joe's list? Like I said, we like to know. So until then, again, subscribe, rate us, tell friends, tell family. Let us know. We'd like to hear from you. And we'll see you guys next week. Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers.